Yellow pages? We are not in the yellow pages. Back pages, front pages. Thank you so much, everybody. This next song is off of our upcoming EP. It's the titular track. It's called 1980,000. We're gonna take you there right now. much, everybody. Hey. I've actually never heard that before with this band. Yeah. Hey. You know, only in Cincinnati, Ohio, guys. It's a magical place. We're glad to be here. Thank you to Urban Artifact for having us. We got some more tunes, a few more tunes, a couple more tunes to play. Thanks to Devin for doing a fabulous sound job, and Michael back there too. You know, can't do it without you guys. All right, guys, once again, this is Luke Bergamini on the bass. Give him a round of applause. Come on. He's working very hard up there and wearing very short shorts. We have Willis Edmonton on the drums. Ben Hammer on the keys. My name's Graham Bloom. I play guitar and I do a little singing. This song is called Not Basketball. Thank you so much, y'all. If you guys are enjoying these tunes, they
Hello,
are
everyone.
available online.
Welcome to Science on Tap Cincinnati. We provide monthly educational science programming and other outreach activities. I want a big shout out and thank you to our partner, Radio Artifact. You can watch this event and all previous Science on Tap at Radio Artifact's YouTube channel and on Twitch. Be sure to follow them and follow Science on Tap Cincinnati on Facebook. I took over organizing this about 5 or 6 years ago. I passed it off to Bob for a couple years. Bob's passed it back. But I took it over from Colin, and I'm really excited to welcome Colin back to the front of the room to do the introduction for this month's speaker. See, there's my performance anxiety. I am in mode.
Well, this is a kind of a reunion for me because I, as she said, used to run these, but it's been 7 years. And coincidentally, 7 years ago is when I started Improv Cincinnati, which is my improv comedy theater, and which is culminating in this improv comedy conference for leaders of comedy theaters. And this is the wrap party for that conference. If you're out there from the conference, give a little shout. It's a lot of you. Yep. I did know. When I said I'd like to have the wrap party here, they were like, well, Science on Tap is happening. And I'm like, I used to organize this. I was very heavily and still casually into science-based skepticism. And the reason that I started Science on Tap is because skeptics talk a lot about what they don't believe in, which is like paranormal and pseudoscience and alternative medicine and things like that. And I felt like I'd like to have a local impact where we talk about what we do believe in, which is in good quality, double-blind, placebo-controlled science. And we believe in climate change, and we believe in vaccines, and anything that is evidence-based. And yeah, right? So when thinking about this event and who I might have, I wanted to find somebody that fit the Venn diagram of something that our local science audience would be interested in hearing about, and also my friends who are leaders for improv theaters, and what could bring those two together. Our speaker today is actually helped my daughter, who is 16 now. She has performance anxiety, severe performance anxiety, to the point where she goes blind a little bit and has paralysis sometimes, and at times of high stress. So, we look for the best possible people, and somebody that could really help her. And one of those people that along that journey was our guest today. Let's give a big hand for Dr. Barbra Walker.
Hello. How is everybody? Good, yeah. So how many people are from the conference? Wow, and I like how you sat up front. And then what about the Science on Tap regulars? Some of you? Okay. Okay, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, I didn't even send this out to my department, which is really sad, or at UC. But it's a good full room, which is great. So in all full disclosure, so I put this together in the last couple of weeks. I teach 3.5 classes at UC in the med school and A&S, and I have a full clinical practice. So I didn't memorize my whole thing, but I know performance psychology, but I'm letting you know that I have lots of notes on here. And I also know, just so you don't bash me inside your mind, I have way too many words on some of my slides. So so I'll try not to speak fast, but I know sometimes I do that. So I wanted to put at least some stuff up that you can see. And I'll try and keep this up so that you can hear me. So who has experienced performance anxiety? Most people in the room. Yeah. It's really common. So we're going to talk through that. And then I'm going to leave some time afterwards for questions. But if you have questions you're dying to ask, just go ahead and ask me. But let me just talk a little bit about where I've come from, too. So you can see my bio. I'm affiliated with Osher Center for Integrative Medicine. I do American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and so I was in a private practice for about 17 years as a sports psychologist, and then I was a performance psychologist working with a lot of business executives and performing artists, a lot of people at CCM, people from around the country actually, but so Integrative Medicine recruited me over about 7 years ago at UC, so I'm still teaching there and also doing clinical work there, which has been amazing. So, but busy, that's for sure. Yeah, especially since COVID. Okay, so I'm just going to keep my glasses on the whole time. Okay, so let's just talk about like what performance anxiety is in terms of the definition of it. So performance anxiety refers to the anxiety that people experience in anticipation of or during important tasks resulting in impaired performance. We know what that feels like, right? So it can affect everyone from public speaking, musicians, athletes, test takers, and even somebody sometimes answering an impromptu question, right? So we kind of sometimes our minds go blank. There's no like absolute that people talk about with test taking, like this, the neural pathway cuts off, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of the science behind this in a little bit. So sometimes this happens, even when somebody's giving a toast, if they're not used to speaking, participating or leading in work presentations, raising your hand to ask or answer a question, maybe in class or a lecture, right? So we know what that feels like. So while you may assume performance anxiety is relatively rare, it's actually one of the most commonly reported symptoms among all social fears, which is interesting. So according to a recent Gallup poll, about 40% of all adults in the U.S. suffer from some sort of stage fright, which is interesting. That's a huge amount, right? And then music performance anxiety, which is known as MPA in my field, is one of the most common disorders among professional musicians. And then the prevalence for MPA is between 16.5 and 60% for musicians. And then sports performance anxiety can impact anywhere from 30 to 60% of athletes. And I think, especially since COVID, thank goodness, we're starting to talk about some of the mental stuff. Like everybody doesn't think every single athlete is so perfect that they don't have some of these mental issues. So when I think about peak performance, and I'm going to show you a picture of this in a moment, but we think about like the goal for every performance is performing in the zone with consistency, right? So the way I've defined this is the idea of a state in which our mind, body, and energy are operating in sync, allowing us to perform to the best of our ability and talents, right? Wouldn't we love to be that way 24/7, right? So in a picture form, when we think about performance states, so on the y-axis we have performance, on the x-axis is stress and energy. So when we are, well, let me ask you this. Well, I'll do this first, then I'll ask you a question. So in terms of being on the left side of this curve, this is where motivation and energy may be needed. So somebody might feel lethargic. They don't really feel like being there. They're kind of distracted, maybe even tired. And then on the right side is where relaxation is needed. And that's where I work with most people on that side of things. So that's where you might have muscle tension, chaos in the head, butterflies in the belly, maybe even some heart palpitations. So or all the above that happens, and that's going to affect somebody's performance. So the area that we're looking to be in is this area of peak performance. So just shout out, if you would, what's this feel like to be in this area of peak performance? When you've had an amazing performance, what is that? What kind of adjectives come to your mind? Easy. Easy, bliss. Euphoric. Present. That's a good one.
No sense of time.
Yeah, no sense of time. Yeah, timeless. Good. Confident? Yeah, relaxed? Yeah, not too relaxed, but relaxed, right? I call it engaged relaxation. Yeah, so it's a great place to be. And think about how often you're there. So we're going to talk about this quickly and move off of it, but the idea of we're on this curve all day, every day, right? Depending on what we're doing. Like sometimes if we're tired in the morning, we might have a little coffee and get ourselves up in this peak performance area. And so sometimes when people are on the right side of that curve, there are things they ingest, right? Well, legally or illegally, to be able to be in that space. So a lot of people use alcohol. So if they have some social anxiety or performance anxiety, they might use alcohol beforehand. One mainly prescribed medication is propanadol, which is really a type of beta blocker medication. It's really for heart issues, but it's worked for performance anxiety. And it really works by blocking the stimulating effect of epinephrine and or adrenaline. So a lot of athletes that I've worked with in the past have been on this, like especially professional golfers use a lot of propanadol, and so do musicians. But the interesting thing about that, even though it might seem like a quick fix or some sort of fix, they can get through their performance, but most of them have told me, like when they're talking about, you know what it feels like when you really hit the peak, right? It feels really good, you're in the sweet spot. They seem like they can't get in the sweet spot, which is really interesting. So they can kind of get through their performance well, but they never feel this. So I work with a lot of people to get off of that, to kind of figure out how they can operate well without having to use medication. So other things other short-term acting drugs, which you may have heard of or may not have, Xanax, people use sometimes, Klonopin, Ativan, Valium, longer-term SSRIs or SNRIs, which are antidepressants. So a lot of people are using some of these things just to get through the day, but some people for performance anxiety. So an SSRI would be something more longer acting, obviously. So let's talk a little bit about explaining anxiety. So anxiety serves as this umbrella. Can you guys even see that? It's so small. Okay, good. That describes a wide range of emotional and mental health experiences. So again, this term is being used widely now, which is fantastic. So at least we can name some of this. And then in everyday use, anxiety might refer to symptoms of these conditions. You'll also hear the term used casually to refer passing emotions of unease, right? Nervousness, worry, dread, right? So those are the kind of things that we hear about. So just in terms of conditions, when we think about, I wanted to kind of think about this on a continuum for you. This is not necessarily performance anxiety, but it's its anxiety at its highest. Is some of the terms are generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, panic, social anxiety disorder, so agoraphobia, separation anxiety, and selective mutism. So a lot of things go under anxiety disorder. So again, it's common for people to have some anxiety, especially when faced with high-stress situations, such as a big game, kind of a presentation at school or work, or making a big life decision. And we know that anxiety can manifest itself either physically or emotionally or both, and we're going to talk about some of those things. So when we think about that bell-shaped curve, so I'm thinking about for people even in improv, so your bell-shaped curve might be scooched over a little bit. If you really feel good coming up and performing and don't have to think twice about it, even though some people do have anxiety anyway and do that, but your bell-shaped curve's moved over a little bit, so your area of peak performance is more tolerable than somebody who feels extraordinarily anxious, but we'll talk through that as well. Sorry, trying to do that with my left hand. Okay, so some differentiation of other anxiety I want to talk a little bit about. So again, everyone experiences some level of anxiety from time to time. It's a natural response to feeling threatened or feeling afraid, right? So the anxiety that comes up will probably depend on different factors, including the specific circumstances of the situation, as well as your own unique personality. And what I want to point out here is there is state anxiety, which you may have remembered from Psych 101. So state anxiety is this natural human response. You don't need to have an underlying anxiety condition to experience fear when facing some type of danger. And again, danger in this case could be coming up on stage or answering a question, right? So it depends on somebody's perception of danger. But the idea of this, so think about state as being a situation. And then trait anxiety, which is next, it refers to anxiety that shows up as part of your personality, not just in stressful situations. So as we dig into the state anxiety thing, I want you to think about, again, this is something that's a situation. Mental symptoms might include feelings of worry, difficulty concentrating, and irritability. Physical symptoms, again, difficulty breathing, rapid heart rate, upset stomach, a lot of GI stuff, mind, body happens, and muscle tension and pain. And then, excuse me, I'm going to buzz through this a little bit because I have too much on trait anxiety. So considered to be, it's a fixed part of your personality. That's really a personality trait. So a higher level of trait anxiety generally means you're likely to feel threatened by specific situations, or even would be in general than someone with a lower level of trait anxiety. So let me buzz through this stuff. So somebody who has trait anxiety might have, like, if they recognize like their partner seems a little distant, they may feel like they're worried on the side that somebody's going to break up with them. With trait anxiety comes some catastrophic thinking sometimes. So I'll give you one example of an executive I worked with years ago. and he's fine, but he had a bit of anxiety where he was a partner in a firm, and there's no way, unless he did something really crazy, would he get fired from this firm. He had a good job. Everyone loved him. But when the managing partner, he'd get a voicemail from that person, he would get really worried. And so not only would he worry, he wouldn't call the person back right away. He should have just picked up the phone. But instead of doing that, he would worry for a while. And then he would actually visualize his daughter and his wife sitting on the curb from their house because they've lost their house. I mean, that's like catastrophic thinking at its finest, right? But that's somebody who has a lot of trait anxiety. And then he's already anxious. The situation comes with the state anxiety with a call, and so then the imagination goes, and we have the capacity to imagine all kinds of things. So that's where we are with that. So the few dimensions of trait anxiety. So we have a threat of social evaluation. So this might again include criticism or conflict. We have a threat of a physical danger, and that could include things like illness or car accidents. So people have a lot of health anxiety or just worry that they're going to get in a wreck. And so that actually could help somebody get into a wreck because they're all tightened up when they're driving. Those are people who are maybe passengers in the car and constantly, like trying to put on their brake on the side or holding on to the dashboard. So depends, I guess, who's driving. Maybe it is good that they're doing that. So ambiguous threat could be this might involve a more general sensation of doom or unexplainable worries. Anybody ever experienced that? And then threat in daily or harmless situations. So this might involve fears around meeting new people or making mistakes in your work. So people carry around this. I mean, they're constantly burning cortisol in their system. So there's a lot of GI issues that happen from some of these things that we need to help people get it under control. You can see I have way too many slides on trait anxiety. So put it another way, you might consider trait anxiety as a predisposition toward experiencing those feelings of fear and worry. So here's some of the symptoms that somebody might have if they have some trait anxiety. So changes in mood, again, over a period of time, like irritability and unease. The unease is a thing. So sometimes I hear people talking about family members, if we're asking about like, your mom or your grandmother or something, and they'll say, yeah, they were just worry-wart, so they were shaky or whatever it might be. Those are those kind of people. And then insomnia, fatigue, body aches, and you can read that. So the key thing I wanted to talk about here is there's a connection between state trait and performance anxiety. So in general, the higher one's level of trait anxiety, the more anxious they're going to feel when facing danger or other threats in a situation. And then the more performance anxiety one can potentially experience, right? So it's kind of just piles up on itself. Okay. So I wanted to kind of show this. I hope you can see that. This is a little study from 1973 that was created, which is a lot of things that we've heard about from public speaking in the first place. So 1973, R.H. Bruskin Associates' American Fear Study initially appeared in the London Sunday Times, and it's been reported in communication textbooks as people fear public speaking more than death. That's just the statistics there. I don't know if has anybody heard of that before? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So some people literally worry for weeks, even months in advance, if they're going to be in a performance situation, and others suffer full-blown panic attacks at a mere thought of taking center stage, including a striking number of people who perform for a living. And I wanted to talk about that because I'm not sure if sometimes we think about this, that happens. So I'm just going to read through this. So Barbra Streisand was one person. She developed overwhelming performance anxiety at the height of her career. So for 27 years, she refused to perform for the general public and appearing live only in private clubs and at charity events where she presumably believed the pressure was less intense, which is interesting. Carly Simon apparently abandoned the stage for 7 years after collapsing from nerves before a concert in Pittsburgh in 1981, if anyone was around then. Ricky Williams, who won the Heisman Trophy in 1998, was known to suffer from severe anxiety, and social interactions made him so nervous that he would only give interviews while wearing his football helmet. His little safety. Yeah, I felt comfortable with that. And then two more people I'll read about. So let's see. I have a bunch of them here. I think this is interesting. In 1889, a long time ago, a young Indian lawyer froze during his first case before a judge and ran from the courtroom in humiliation. My head was reeling and I felt as though the whole court was doing likewise, the lawyer would write later after he became known as Mahatma Gandhi. Is that interesting? Yeah. And I could go on about that, but I think it's really interesting. And then lastly, Thomas Jefferson had his law career disrupted by a fear of public speaking. One of his biographers notes that if he tried to declaim loudly, his voice would sink in his throat. He never spoke during the deliberations of the Second Continental Congress, and remarkably, according to Joshua Kendall's book, America's Obsessives, gave only 2 public speeches, his inaugural addresses during his years as president. Is that interesting? Yeah. We couldn't see that now. That would not happen now, right? Yeah, so lots of people. So if you feel any of this, you're not alone, that's for sure. So let's talk specifically about the symptoms of performance anxiety. So emotional symptoms, we kind of talked about that a little bit with the state and trait anxiety. So a lot of fear, a lot of worry, apprehension, embarrassment, and self-doubt. And that creates significant distress and negatively affects an individual's ability to focus on tasks, right? So, I'll just go on cognitive symptoms that can lead to negative thought patterns, like my client I just talked about, including excessive self-criticism, unrealistic expectations, and a heightened focus on failure. This type of thinking contributes to a cycle of fear and reduces self-confidence. So I'm going to give a sports example that's on the top of my mind at the moment. It's interesting because has anybody heard of the yips before? Yeah. It's interesting. I'll give one example that happens in golf all the time, but sometimes it happens with baseball players. And so one that I'm working with now, I mean, it's interesting what happens. It happens to gymnasts. It happens to all kinds of athletes. But they end up feeling stuck, like somebody, I know I throw like a girl, but the idea of like somebody's trying to throw, they've been throwing for years and years and years, and suddenly something happens where maybe they totally misread a throw and they threw terribly. So then they get stuck in their head. Maybe some people said something to them. Maybe their position's on the line, whatever it is, but it creates this little loop, and then they end up getting stuck. So so for me as a performance psychologist, as a sports psychologist, I have to kind of undo that, and we do all kinds of like relaxation training and things, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's really interesting with just even Colin, what you talked about for your daughter. I mean, the mind and body are very connected, right? And so sometimes we have to kind of untangle that to figure out how to be able to help somebody with something they've been doing for a very long time, which is kind of interesting. So additional symptoms, so physical symptoms, again, increased heart rate happens. When we think about even panic, not just performance anxiety, a lot of people go to the emergency room because I think they're having a heart attack sometimes, but it's really a panic attack. Shortness of breath, and we're going to talk about breath in a moment. Trembling, seeding, dry mouth, gastrointestinal issues. Again, mind, body's connected. There's more serotonin in our gut than there is in our brain, and so our gut is so incredibly important in terms of us being able to function well. So all these can further worsen emotional and cognitive symptoms, and then behaviorally, in response to the emotional reaction, the cognitive and physical symptoms, this may cause behavioral changes, including avoiding situations that trigger more anxiety, right? They withdraw, don't really want to go do that. And so it makes people more fearful. It's kind of like you need to get back on the horse if something like that happens, literally. But interpersonal consequences can strain relationships with colleagues, friends, and family members. So some people don't want to admit they have anxiety either, or maybe they don't even know what that is. And so you can see where maybe sometimes people come across a little bit like a jerk, or they're just really quiet and they're not speaking, or they might even have a little scowl on their face, but somebody misinterprets that. It's really the person's anxious, but they don't recognize it as that or don't want to admit it. So it's really interesting how that kind of affects people as well. So some common causes of performance anxiety. Number one, fear of failure. Who does not in the room have fear of failure? Everyone have it? I mean, we think about that, right? So we are definitely prone to what if thinking, right? So we spend much of our time asking ourselves, like, what if I fail? What if I let others down? So our fear of failure leaves us uptight and focused on what could go wrong instead of what we need to avoid, rather than on getting the job done. So you can train yourself to be in a different space than that, but it's an interesting thing that it's a common experience for a lot of people. And then unrealistic expectations. So we're prone to perfectionism, right? There's probably a biological reason for us to be in that space. Does anybody know anyone that's perfect? Good, you're not admitting that you are either. But the idea of, everybody's trying to get to this place of perfect, which is completely impossible. And so we think about, I try not to use the word perfect, but trying to use the word excellence, because we're all prone to that, but it doesn't mean anything. So we set ourselves up for unrealistic expectations, and then we judge ourselves harshly when we don't deliver, right? And then when we are in that like all or nothing thinking, whether we're either successful or a failure, results in anxiety and competition or in challenging situations, right? And then lastly, which is a huge one, is a lack of confidence. So our belief in our ability to be successful or achieve specific goals impacts our degree of anxiety, right? So too little, and then we can become stuck, but expecting failure and unwilling to try. So we want to make sure that you're staying in this place of confidence. Again, that's in that zone that we try to be in. And then we'll talk about how to get there. So a little bit more of the science behind this. So there's definitely science behind performance anxiety. So one of the really interesting things is anytime we have like a negative or anxious thought in our head, we start contracting muscle fibers in our body without even realizing it. A lot of times, sometimes we do realize it, but a lot of times we don't. And so when that happens, we also start breathing really shallowly. And so as soon as we breathe shallowly, our brain picks up that we're in this fight or flight mode. So it's engaging our HPA axis, it's engaging our autonomic nervous system. And so it all starts in this hypothalamus in our brain, literally by what we're perceiving and what we do to our body. And then this loop happens. And so then as soon as your brain picks up that we're in fight or flight mode, it sends about 20 different messages to your body to get you ready for fleeing or fighting, right? So we can imagine over and over again. So this has been there since cave person days, which it needs to be, because if your bear or tiger was literally coming your way, you better need to make a decision, right? So, but that only happened like far and few between. So think about nowadays with all the stressors that we have and all this media and all this stuff coming at us, right? All these comparisons and all our high stress type A behavior, we're constantly in that space, right? And then the worst thing is really for me thinking about this is that people don't recover in between. So you might have a stressor and then try and recover, right? That's what used to happen, you know. When you think about a gazelle, maybe out in a field somewhere, it might have a little alert, and then its flock or whatever goes and runs away from the threat, and then they go back to eating, right? So then they're recovering. But we don't do that. We don't do a lot of recovery, which makes it worse. So we're changing our biochemistry constantly by being in that space. So the idea of this is really managing our thoughts is really key. So first of all, like we become what we think about most. So attitude about ourselves, what are our thoughts, feelings, and intuitions about ourselves? And then we create a particular self-image, right? So a physical self-image and a psychological self-image. Like, I can do this, right? I'm capable of doing this. And how do I feel about myself physically? Being able to manage this task. And then that builds on our confidence. And then it's really important underneath confidence there with expectations about achieving success. Do you believe you can do this? So and maybe you can talk about that with your own performance, but when I work with athletes in particular, like some people will say, like, yeah, when I was on the line, I knew I was going to get that, or we knew we were going to get it. We knew we could win this, you know. So, and it's not an overconfidence, but it's a confidence that there's this linear path that they create because they've done all the training, but also because they believe they can do that. So, I mean, there's a lot of that in between, and then the performance happens. So the other piece I was talking about before, which not just the HPA axis, is this autonomic nervous system. Again, I mentioned that. But I wanted to put this slide up here too because I think it's really important to look at what happens. So we have, in our autonomic nervous system, again, it's known as a fight or flight system. It has two branches to it, so the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system, and I think of that as like being on a seesaw. And so if we're feeling in that zone, like I showed on that bell-shaped curve, that is in the zone, and that's when you're balanced, when your autonomic nervous system is balanced. Anytime we're on the right side of that curve in particular, we've got in sympathetic engagement. So again, think about that negative, scary thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this, right? I tighten up, and then I start breathing shallowly, and then brain picks up that I'm feeling that way, and then sends all these messages. So you've got all these changes that happen. And so it's very interesting. And I'm going to show you some ways to kind of get around all this, to kind of right the system. But the goal is to have this consistent balance and recovery. But it shows, again, the mind-body. Somebody could be sitting, you could be sitting here right now thinking about that, or sitting in your family room, nice and safe, with a fireplace or whatever. Not today, but the idea of just being nice and calm, and then you could start thinking about something, and you can start your heart palpitating. Has that ever happened to anybody before? Get nervous? Yeah, it's really interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about one of the things I do a lot with people in my office is I do a lot of biofeedback because it gives us feedback about your biology. So the type of biofeedback I do mainly is called heart rate variability. And so we literally put a little sensor on somebody's earlobe and it picks up their heart rate, which is really cool to begin with, right, to know you can do that. But so heart rate is, as we know, the number of heartbeats per minute. But heart rate variability is the fluctuation in the time intervals between adjacent heartbeats. And I have a whole paragraph on this, but I won't tell you all the details of this unless you really want to hear them. But one of the things I wanted to show you is, so what I do, and this isn't going to look too dramatic, but so this person in particular, I just wanted to give you two examples. So this is somebody with, I can't even see what the heart rate is, it's like 70 something. And so this is somebody just having their little heart rate variability sensor on. And you can see they're sitting there doing nothing. They're in the piece of my office, right? And their heart rate's kind of all over the place. You can see that. You can even see these little red lines in here? Can you see that? There's like a few red lines. Those are literally disconnects in the heart rhythm from stress, which is really interesting. So this is literally, and I promise this is not a bait and switch, literally the next session, like right after that, like in a few minutes, I teach people this diaphragmatic breathing that probably most of you know, but we'll practice it in a second anyway. And I get these kind of things. So do you see how much more pleasant that is? You get these nice sine rhythms. The next person, let me show you this. So this is another person. You can see their heart rate variability again is different. It's kind of jagged. It's a little bit chaotic, not as chaotic as the other one. And then literally a few minutes later, I teach them this breathing technique. And that's beautiful. That's like textbook good. And so I'm not even necessarily, sometimes I'm trying to lower people's heart rate, which we can do, depending on if they're, how far along they've had a really high heart rate or what kind of shape they're in. But it's interesting. You can teach people this in just a few minutes. But that's what it looks like when you're doing a really nice diaphragmatic breath. And I've been using this software for probably 20 years. And it's interesting because everybody says, I feel centered, I feel relaxed, I feel calm, I feel good, I feel clear. So it's a great thing to practice and do. So I thought I can do a couple things depending on what time we have. So I want to teach you this mindful breath. If we have time at the end, I'm happy to have a couple of volunteers. I can set this up right this second. You guys can practice this biofeedback if you want. We can see it in action. With one of our most stressed people in the audience, maybe, who knows, yeah. So we can really make it a good effect. So here's the mindful breath. Again, most of you probably already know this. And again, remember, as soon as we get stressed, we start breathing shallowly. So I think breathing well is the first line of defense for anything with stress, in particular performance anxiety. So we want to breathe from as low as in our belly as we can, all the way up through your chest. Don't get caught up in the diaphragmatic breath stuff because everyone gets kind of confused. And just breathe as low in your belly, all the way up through your chest. You don't have to go super high in your chest, just go kind of medium high. And so the intention is a little bit bigger than your normal breath, but not so big that you feel lightheaded. If you breathe really big, if you start feeling lightheaded, just back off a notch. The other thing I find helpful from a cognitive standpoint, because we all have a capacity for the monkey mind or the butterfly brain, however you want to think about it going on. So the idea of using a count that works, and if you have a pretty good heart rate in the 60s or 70s, I don't know if you can measure that now, but if you have a pretty good heart rate, all you want to do is find a count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out. There's a lot of different kind of breathing techniques, and I don't mean to say mine's number one, but I measure it and I know it really works. So skip box breathing, skip the 4, 7, 8. I don't know. There's all kinds of breath out now. I'm so glad that people are paying attention to breathing. But when you hold your breath, does anybody do box breathing? Okay. All right. When you do box breathing, when you hold your breath, if you have any capacity towards anxiety, it makes your heart rate go up. Yeah, which doesn't make any sense, right? So here's what I want you to do. So as soon as if you want to visualize the heart rhythms, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in. And then as soon as you get to the tip top, there's a teeny tiny pause. And then you go back into a slow exhale and then an inhale. So just think about it as a really slow roller coaster, but don't consider gravity because downhill would obviously go faster. Okay, so I'm going to let you go for just a minute and do that. Close your eyes and just allow yourself to do that breath. See how that feels. And just count as loudly in your mind as you need to if you have some thoughts going through there, following your breath all the way in and all the way out. And then open your eyes and maintain the same breath. So you can look around, you can just look in front of you, and see how that feels with your eyes open. Good. How's that feel? Good. Everyone awake? Yeah, it's kind of brave doing it at the end of the day like this. Yeah, good, good. Yeah. And it's simple, right? It's really simple. And I love it. It makes a huge difference. And I know we can't measure everybody in here, but it's really interesting how much of a difference that makes. It makes you take a pause, right? Allows you to have some space between you and whatever's going on. Allows you to calm down. And it's a first line of defense because automatically, like just doing the breath and not thinking about anything else, it's actually giving a message to your brain, no, everything's okay, right? If you start to react already. So it's a really interesting thing. It lets you kind of just pause and be. And then the counting is helpful because it allows you to get away from a little distraction, get away from whatever you were thinking about too, which is great. Good. All right. And it's free and portable, which is really lovely. Okay, so all these are coming up at once. So the key strategies for performance anxiety, reducing performance anxiety. Be prepared and well practiced. You already know this, right? We need to make sure. That's why athletes and all of you practice, right? Practice, perfect practice as much as you can, so that you have created this neuromuscular connection that you're not having to think about it too much, right? So I think I've said everything on there. And then you practice mindfulness and mindful breathing, like just the mindful breath I just taught you is a beautiful thing to just practice. Mindfulness in general, it's been kind of a buzzword the last few years, but it's been around 2,500 years. But the idea of mindfulness is really focusing on the present moment, as paying attention to the present moment as non-judgmentally, non-reactively, and open-heartedly as possible. So being in that space is a really great space. You kind of don't allow yourself to worry so much about the past or the future. It's kind of focusing on right now. Because that's a lot of times with anxiety, what we're worried about is what's happening, how other people are going to imagine what's happening for you, or if you're going to screw up, if I fail, all that kind of stuff. So, or what might happen in the future. Staying hydrated is important. Limiting caffeine and sugar. Again, know how your body reacts to those kind of things. Fueling yourself, making sure you have a little bit to eat. Again, I'm talking about athletes mostly, but it's interesting. So many of them can't eat before a performance, and so sometimes they're there all day at a particular performance because they're afraid or their appetite gets shut down. They can't force themselves to eat, or they get sick. So trying to figure that out is challenging, but making sure they get something in. But I would think that's the same thing for any performing artist for sure. And then positive self-talk, again, managing any perceived expectations. So it's not to be Pollyanna, but I like just having a mantra, like I can do this, right? This is gonna be okay. I'm not gonna die, whatever it might be, I'm ready. So practicing like even some self-compassion, being kind to yourself, keeping your perfectionism in check is really important. I even like just a couple of cue words. So I like, like confident and relaxed or strong and focused, whatever they might be for you as an adjective that fit your life to bring yourself back to this place, just to be centered. And then finding a friendly face. So there's lots of friendly faces out here tonight, but when you're performing and stuff, it's really great to just look at somebody and when people nod, when we all need to do that to each other, it's really hard sometimes when you're talking to a group and nobody's like even looking at you, right? But allowing yourself to find a friendly face so that you can be present with that person in that performance. So that's all I have. So I am happy. I think we have a little bit of time. Can we have maybe one person? Does one person want to try the biofeedback? One person. Are you a nervous one? Okay, you want to come up? Yeah. If we have time, we'll do two. Okay, come on up. Yay! So while I'm getting this set up, does anybody have any questions or comments in between here? Yes.
It seems like a lot of the approach that you were talking about in terms of relating to the anxiety is sort of like turning certain dials to manage your state. Do you employ any other strategies related to maybe an approach, acceptance and commitment therapy type approach of mindfulness, kind of stepping back out of the whole process altogether? Does that work into kind of your approach with your clients?
Yeah, a little
Do you
bit.
understand what I'm saying?
I think so. Like just in terms of, you mean like instead of just like cognitive behavioral kind of stuff, it's really like more mindfulness based, where you're like letting thoughts come in, evaluating them, and letting them out. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, right. As opposed to a cognitive behavioral
Yeah.
approach, you're taking a step back and
Yeah.
kind of like zooming way out from the stories and just recognizing what is happening. This is the kind of more like a data point or
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I hate the word should, but we should all be doing it that way. I think it's interesting. I kind of have an MBCT approach to things, but the idea of like, it's interesting when you've got the monkey mind going on or whatever thoughts you have coming in. We're never going to be free of those. But the idea of being able to recognize that you are the being behind all that. The mind has a mind of its own. And so I always kind of do this. So like holding your thoughts out here, if you do pay attention to what they are, and that's kind of the, isn't that interesting? I'm thinking about that again, right? And then letting it literally go down a stream, go on a leaf down a stream, or just let it go in the clouds, kind of dissipate it. Because the truth is we don't necessarily have to evaluate those thoughts sometimes. They are just thoughts of their own, and we can think of them sometimes as a frenemy and just let them be there. And that's interesting, that's coming up again. Because sometimes these performance anxiety situations can be a really thick neural pathway, right? So we want to make sure that we're kind of almost letting grass growing back over there and creating this new way of being. I hope that answers that question. Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good. Back in the back. Yeah, and then we'll have you.
I don't know if you notice in football games if there's like 1 second, a couple seconds left in the game, and there's a kicker and a field goal would win the game. Frequently, the other team calls a timeout. They think about it. And I think it's probably taking advantage of performance anxiety.
Yeah, or taking advantage of momentum.
Oh, what's momentum?
Momentum, even, right? Yeah.
You think making the kicker think about it would probably increase in anxiety and cause them to not make the field goal?
Yes, absolutely, right? Yeah, there's all kinds of strategies like that. Yeah. It's good. Yes.
I was doing a musical recital once and my hands were shaking. And the music teacher said, give your hands permission to shake.
Oh.
Stop shaking. So what's going on neurologically there? Just curious. Is there some other brain?
So the question was, or the thought was, your hands are shaking, and your teacher said, just let your hands shake.
Actually,
Give your hands permission to shake. So what ended up happening?
It went away. The shakes went away.
I think you relaxed. What do you think?
Yeah.
I mean, that's all. That's all mind-body stuff, right? Yeah, because you were all contracted up. Yeah. I don't think it's anything more than that. It's interesting, and that happens to so many people in so many different parts of their body. It's amazing. Yeah, it's things that people carry. Yeah, that's good. I love that. Good.
I have a question. So you mentioned recovery, like if we're stressed, and there's like a section that's recovery. And you mentioned that it's mainly like relaxation and like slowing down. But is there any like recovery that's active? Because I know like if you watch like ducks and they fight, and then they finish their fight and they'll flap their wings and like try and recover like through activity. Is that a thing?
Yeah, so I remember I'm supposed to repeat these questions. So is there active recovery versus just passive recovery with like relaxation? Yeah, so I think it depends on what you're doing. So like being able to go walk something off, right, would be good. Sometimes even maybe before a performance, it could be like even doing some push-ups or some jumping jacks or something, but you could do the same thing afterwards. What else could be recovery for you as actors? What do you think? Yeah, listening to music.
You happen to be in a position where you're having a panic attack and you cannot walk or leave the stage Oh, sure.
Yeah. If you happen to be in a position where you're having a panic attack and you're on stage and you can't leave or you can't walk away or do anything, a good thing that I was taught technique was grounding yourself. And if you don't know what that is, it's finding 5 things, and I think there are variations of this. 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can smell, 2 things, it's going down the list of senses, and basically just, that's what grounding is. And it's basically getting your mind to focus on these things. That gets you out of that like panic, fight, or flight state. So I know personally I've been in positions before where I have not been able to just go for a walk, which would be really nice. It would be really nice to put ice on your back when you're sweating profusely because you're panicking. But if we're on stage and we're in the middle of a performance, you can't do that. So those grounding exercises could really help, and I learned that through therapy. So yay.
Yeah. Did anybody have one more question, then we'll get to our subject.
About techniques to address physical tension in the body, especially like in the moment. When you recognize there's physical tension and you need to be able to like release it, what are some practical things you can do to do that?
Yeah, so questions of practical ideas to release tension in the body in the moment, right? So has anybody ever practiced progressive muscle relaxation? Where you like tighten it and you relax, tighten and relax, and you can hold it for a few seconds. So that's generally done. I mean, it can be done in a couple seconds to like 45 minutes, right? Depending on how many body parts you want to do. But you could, if depending on where you are and how comfortable you feel, I mean, you could do a really quick one, like tighten yourself up all the way a couple times and then let yourself release. There's something called passive muscle relaxation, which is kind of like, I like to think about it like an ooze, like from head to toe, like as you're exhaling. So take a deep breath, and as you're exhaling, just kind of go through body parts that you're holding tense. You might not even realize you're holding some tense. There's also some things called a body scan, and that I have a couple recordings, like one that's 2 minutes, one that's 12, and one that there's some that are 45. Body scan is just literally being like really aware of little body parts, and it's interesting. Just a little side note, so when COVID first happened, my department asked me if I would do some meditation for faculty, and then some of the faculty said, well, I'm not available at that time, so Barbara Walker decided to do it 3 times a day at one point for people, and that didn't last too long, but the interesting thing is when I did the body scan, I feel pretty aware of my body, but it was interesting when I did the body scan exercise, because whatever I would choose to do that day, I did it 3 times. I didn't do 3 different ones. It was so interesting. It was such an enlightening thing for me, because you feel like you know what your body's doing, and then you try and relax it or be aware of it in a little bit more in this minute way, and you can still soften. So soften's the word I like to use for that. But those kind of things would be really good to do, right? Then in good old stretching, if you can do like a little downward dog or, like some yoga pose or something to allow yourself to really stretch, even hang, from your hips and just allow yourself to kind of go down. I won't do that in my dress, but the idea of just allowing that to be let go, yeah, either passively or progressively. Yeah, okay, we ready? Okay. All right, so she has this little sensor on her earlobe. I feel like I'm whispering now. Okay. All right. So here we go. No pressure. I hope you're really tense and anxious. Oh, good. You are. Good. Okay. I know if people ask me that, am I going to get hurt? I'm like, might emotionally get hurt, but not other than that. Okay, this is perfect. Okay, so do you feel a little anxious? Good. Okay. I just say that because we'll be able to get you in a good place. So this is somebody's pulse right here, or not somebody's, it's your pulse. What's your first name? Hannah. Okay. So this is Hannah's pulse, and that's going to go, it gives us different data, so that already went away. So this is the interesting thing. So this is Hannah's heart rate. You can see it kind of like going up and down all over the place, and this is what happens. Our heart rate changes from moment to moment to moment. So it got pretty high there for a second. So it's interesting. We'll see this kind of playing around. So you got a little bit of the red lines that I was talking about, a little bit of stress, which is fine. So here's what happens with this stuff down here, this coherence ratio. So depending on the quality of this heart rhythm here, coming from our earlobe, it will, you can put somebody in, it'll be in the red, blue, or green, which means low, medium, or high coherent state. So when it's in the low, which it's not even been in yet, when it's in the low, it's really choppy and erratic, and I can maybe pull somebody's up that's really choppy. The blue's kind of going in the right direction, and then the green is in this high, which is these really nice sine rhythms. Now, naturally, and I don't know if you're practicing breathing right now, or you're just being. Oh, good. Okay. So you're kind of there naturally. So let's just do this, and everybody's going to breathe along with you. You're not going to be the only one. So go ahead and just close your eyes and just breathe from as low in your belly as you can all the way up through your chest, just nice and easy. And everybody else has their eyes closed too, so don't worry. And find that count that we just practiced. And then for you, whatever count you have going up, so say it's 5, I want you to go down 6 or 7 if you can, without feeling like you're way out of breath. I'll just give you about 30 more seconds for that, or a minute maybe. As soon as you get to the tip top, just exhale. Okay, do you feel a little bit more relaxed at all? A little bit more? So how did that feel? It does feel good? So in Hannah's case, I'm sorry to call you out on that. So if you were to come in to see me, what I would do is really work at those long exhales, because it literally pulls down the heart rate, which is amazing. So if you have a situation where all of a sudden you're recognizing your heart's pounding, literally breathing into your belly, which affects your vagal nerve, which is your 10th cranial nerve, it works like a charm, because it's all attached to that parasympathetic system. So that's the thing to practice. But again, even naturally, now you can see, like, after we started practicing the breath, I guess around here, there's no more red lines, so that was good. And then suddenly, again, you can see your heart rate going down too, which is neat. So you'd practice this a little bit more than just that one time. Do we have time for one more person? Anybody else brave enough to do it? You want to? Okay, thank you. You did great, yay! That's brave. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it possible that I'm asking for a friend? That I might do anxiety, but I don't know it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We'll find out. No. Oh, you're moving away from me. Okay, there we go. Okay, you ready? It's not pulling too much, is it? Okay. All right, we'll just start that again. We'll just see where you are first before you breathe, the diaphragmatic breathing. Just being. See how his pulse looks so much different? Everybody's pulse looks so unique and individual, which is interesting. Do you feel like your heart rate's kind of high right now? Okay, it is. So that's the other interesting thing with this. This is just feedback. So if somebody stays in the red the whole time, like in the low, and they're choppy, and they say, I can't clear my head, that's okay, because that's good feedback. We know that. Now we're going to try and make it different.
Is there anything related maybe to blood pressure?
Blood pressure and heart rate kind of go hand in hand, but not always. Yeah. And so you can see it settling down just since you sat down. And it may have been a little higher just because you got up too.
Alcohol have an effect on your heart rate as well?
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. So just go ahead and close your eyes and just do that diaphragmatic breath. And again, for you, your heart rate's a little lower already. You could do a little bit extra exhale. But in general, maybe just stick with a 5 and 5 or 6 and 6, whatever makes sense for you. It'll write itself in a second. It'll put everything on the screen. And he's already in the green. There's auditory feedback to this too, but I don't know if we need to play that. That's beautiful. And then keep your eyes closed. And can you think of a time that you felt kind of stressed, besides coming up here? Like maybe put yourself in a situation, forget about the breath for a second, and just allow yourself to be kind of in a performance environment or something that would normally make you feel a little stressed out. And think about what you say to yourself, how your body feels, maybe tensed up. And then just go back to that breath, if you would. It's nice and easy, and count as loudly in your mind as you need to, just to let go of whatever you're thinking about. Just about 30 more seconds. You're doing beautifully. It's nice and easy. It's almost there. It's almost there. Yeah, it's about to go in the green. I'm going to stop it though. So that was beautiful. How did that feel?
Did I pass the test?
You passed. Yeah, you passed. Yeah. Good. That was good. Yeah. So, so again, this is just feedback, but you can see, like, look at the beginning when it's all choppy.
So when I'm in the red, I was thinking about that thing.
Yeah. I know. It's really interesting. This is like mind-body, work at its finest in terms of the connection. Thank you so much. Yay. Good. All right. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Yes.
I'm not an actor. Actress, that's terrible in stage freeze. But the space where I work, I've noticed, not since COVID, but more so after COVID, that the majority of my employees are suffering from performance anxiety. And I'm not sure if it's a combination of being back in the office and with the essential duties are almost triple, where the employee is doing not one job, not two jobs, but a hybrid of everything, and they're stressed out. But we can't say that word at work, that they're stressed out, because we're creating more stress.
Right.
So this is my question. We have lactation rooms that sit dormant for 10.5 months out of the year. No one's using them, right? So I kidnap them to use them as quiet rooms.
Good.
For the employees, to give them a moment to have a quiet space, just like the football player that had his helmet on. Sometimes the employees need that moment, just quiet, just shut up, just go
Right.
to the room, be quiet, right?
Yeah.
We found that suggesting to the employee to call the employee assistance line was creating more stress. So we stopped doing that. They know that it's available.
Like they almost needed to come up with it on their own versus somebody telling them to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to figure out what else can I do in this space of working with the employees to give them permission that it's okay. There are no perfect people at work. There are not. So I'm here to tell you as your HR person that that person doesn't exist. Trust me, they're not on the payroll. They
Right.
don't exist.
Right.
If you need a moment to get up and walk away from your workspace, I'm telling you as your HR manager that you can do that. If your manager is telling you that a label to say, oh, this is a bad habit. No, it's not.
Right, right.
There's so many contributing factors that is creating to this choking where the employees are underperforming.
Yeah. I mean, what you're doing now is amazing as an HR person to be able to say that. I would look at the top down to make sure that everybody's towing the line, the same conversation, because my guess is that some of the employees don't feel comfortable that their bosses, even though you said, let me know, right? They're afraid to get somebody in trouble, or they're afraid to even take the time out to go do, which is happening for a lot of people with burnout and things like that. I think keep those messages going, and I think that maybe even doing a little focus group with a group of them to see what else do they need. So I did some work with UC. Last year, we were working on some burnout kind of protocols, and it was interesting because we did not need to reinvent the wheel with the group I was in. There are so many resources out there, but we found that people couldn't find the resources, or they didn't feel like they could step off the hamster wheel long enough, which we can all identify with, to get the help that they need because they can't take the time to do it. So like when I talk about, like for some people, like bookending their days with 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation, that how easy it is to kick the can down the road I can't take 5 minutes out, right? But if we, another little thing I was going to say with this, like some of the students that I work with on an undergrad level in particular, like medical science students, I teach this one class called Nature-Based Therapies and Ecopsychology, and it's been amazing. It's all the science about telling people to put their phones down and going outside, right? All the science around that piece of it. And so that's something they say, or even teaching them like a mindfulness project. They say, well, this is great, I would have never done this on my own, right? So somehow can you incentivize them to start practicing some of these things and then changing the culture to allow them to have permission to do that instead of, another simple example. I worked with this one company where there were people from different cities that came in for the week, and some people lived in the city, but most people came in from outside, and there were work groups from different areas that would be in a particular I'm trying not to give the name of the company, so I'm dying to. But it was interesting because there was a message. This is pre-COVID. I should go see if this is way post-COVID, but this is all pre-COVID, where there was a message that somebody would show up with the same work clothes on at this work group, and guess what? That meant I worked all night long. Aren't I amazing? Right? So we need to change that culture. And I think slowly, thank goodness people younger than all of us are changing that culture. I think they're not putting up with it. But so we need to continue to change that culture to be able to help them understand that we need to be outside, we need to have our phones down. I mean, all that overload, like you said, like the guy with the helmet on or going into a quiet room for a moment, we need to get ourselves away from that, from our physical and mental health, for sure. Yeah, but maybe doing a little focus group or something with them and seeing what they need. But I think just continuing to talk to even the people in between them. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah, you're welcome. Very welcome. Yes.
So, if anything, and this is kind of adding on to a lot of what I've heard from people, it sounds like in this anxiety state, almost the way to get out of it is to recognize your agency. So, like giving your hands permission to shake, like giving yourself permission to kind of take the time out, and so I guess like, is there a good way for people to see that agency and feel that agency, even in situations where they might not necessarily feel like they have that because they've got, somebody that's like their boss and they're like, but hey, I'm HR, and I'm telling you that you need to do this. So, like, I don't know, how do you let people acknowledge their agency even if they don't have, like, I guess, full power over it in a certain
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's got to be like continue to be talked about as being okay, right? Yeah. And then people trying it out a little bit and then seeing that worked. And then if my coworker, I get people to get out and walk, during lunch if we can. And God knows I have tons of work and I should be, not should, but I could do charts all day long, right? Never be finished. But but it's interesting, like going out and doing that. Gosh, I feel a lot better. So I, send a message out to people. I'm going to 12:15, come with me, meet me at my office. But that kind of starts a little trend that means it's okay versus us sitting in our office, right? So just finding these little cohorts, maybe at a grassroots level, being able to do it. But I also think talking, since you were at the top of that, being able to talk down so that people get that message. Because those people in the middle aren't doing well either, right? Yeah, nobody's doing well. I don't want that to be my final message. Yeah. But since COVID, we know there's a lot of anxiety and depression, and people are talking about it. I think there's always been, but there's more stress, but I think that at least people are talking about it. So, but being able to make these changes, I think, are really important, and I have so much hope that that will happen. Yeah.
I was just gonna add, like, also, if you know you're going to go into a stressful environment, doing those breathing exercises before your shift, if you know you have a conversation with your boss or something, or you know you have to talk to them later, like, I do meditation before a performance regularly, and I find it better prepares me in
Yeah.
my just mental state. I am better able to handle those anxious situations just because I prepared myself beforehand. So that's something, like, if you can't step away and go to the mother's room or something, just knowing before your shift while you're still at home, doing that as preparation can help as well.
Yeah, and that's where it's really great to like bookend your days with some of these things, even 5 minutes. And then again, like if you're going into a situation, even when you're driving to work, just don't close your eyes, right? But the idea of like just as you're going into work, being able to just be prepared, almost like you're preparing for competition or something, but keeping yourself really centered and being super aware to be able to do that. Yeah, it's good. Yep.
Do you find that there's a lasting effect from the breathing, or is it temporary? Have you looked at how long the change lasts?
So I think that's really difficult to answer. I think it can last a long time. I think it depends on the person and then maybe what situation. Like if I feel really relaxed right now, but a tiger's coming behind me, right, I'm going to react to that. So, but I think that it just depends on somebody's personality. Again, the state and trait anxiety, even mindfulness. There's a lot of great information, but sometimes people think it just lasts for that moment. But when we think about the idea of mindfulness meditation, when you put that together, if you can bookend a little bit, and you don't have to spend your entire life just doing mindfulness meditation, wouldn't that be lovely? But the idea of doing that and then kind of having some mindful moments like during the day, so kind of stringing it together a little bit more, and then being really aware so that you can be recentered, because we're not going to be in that zone all the time. There's impossible. We live in a stressful world, so we're going to react to things, but keep coming back to that center, I think, is a key thing. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yep. One more question?
So related to that, I've read things in the popular press that say that with long-term meditation there are changes in the structure of the brain.
Yes.
How definitive is the science?
Very. So when people can, they practice meditation for a longer period of time, not just like once, right? The gray matter volume in the brain increases. The other interesting thing, so we've got our prefrontal cortex, and in particular the anterior cingulate in our prefrontal cortex. It's really interesting that that gets enhanced when we practice meditation, and then our amygdala, which is our, fight or flight area, where we're kind of our hindbrain, our old brain, that actually gets suppressed when we practice mindfulness meditation. So I don't want to end on this either, but I was going to say the interesting thing is you think about, like, especially in our city, my goodness, there's like, if you watch the news, which I hardly ever do, there's guns, like so many people have a gun, right, and shooting each other, and so that's people acting on through their amygdala, right? They're not using their frontal lobe. So it's interesting to think about being able to teach some of that to, the wide, to all the people, to be able to kind of learn how to do that a little bit more. But there's literally structural changes in the brain, which is amazing. And that creates, when you maintain gray matter, that's keeping you fluid, that's keeping the neuroplasticity going. So it's beautiful. I mean, it's a great thing to practice, and it really makes a huge difference. Yeah, I know. One other question. What is hypnosis?
Everybody performs very well when they're hypnotized.
Oh, that's interesting. Have you seen a hypnosis performance before? Yeah, I think it's really interesting, like stage hypnosis. I don't do stage hypnosis, but hypnosis, you hypnotize yourself all the time. You're hypnotizing yourself when you're telling yourself you can or you can't, the messages all the time. So it's or you're in a trance state when you're sometimes driving, and you all of a sudden are like, oh my gosh, how did I get to my exit already, right? Yeah, so you're constantly being hypnotized, but I find it fascinating with the stage hypnotism. I believe it, but I've never practiced it or, done it. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
fine. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Next month's meeting, I didn't breathe before I came up here. November 1st, Dr. Bayless from the University of Cincinnati will be here talking about the James Webb Space Telescope and what we're finding there, and hopefully has a plan B if this planet goes to hell. I don't want to leave on that note either, but now that we're all anxious, we can breathe again. Thank you all for being here.